So we've been teasing Anime Figure Archive for well over a year now, and it's taken this long because we needed one very specific piece of hardware to produce it. And that piece of hardware is a computer. And in today's video, we are finally going to assemble said computer, and we're going to go over Anime Figure Archive's format and why we even need a computer in the first place. We'll go over the backstory of why it's taken us so long to get to this point. Then we're going to talk about what's going in the computer, build it, and showcase the final build, which is set to be our centerpiece for the rest of the reviews on this channel. If you're new to this channel and here because of the PC building content, I'm Senpai, and welcome to the Kohai's Collection group. We normally do in-depth figure reviews, and if you're interested in that kind of content, please consider checking out the rest of the channel and subscribing. The next part of this video is going to be a little long-winded because I'm describing things for the anime figure side of things. So if you're just here for the PC content, feel free to check the chapters below and skip ahead to the build montage and final results. So first and foremost, why even bother filming this build if we're just an anime figure review channel? Well, if you saw our collection video and the AFA PC video, you'll know that PCs are a big part of my life, and this PC is going to be a centerpiece for the rest of the channel. So really, this is just to document something that's going to be an integral part of the success of this channel moving forward. And if someone asks about this desk and what it is, I've got a video to show them. Being a small channel here on YouTube, we have to do things to differentiate ourselves, and one of which is the desk you see here below. I don't see anybody else with a desk that's uplit, and no one else has this turntable because it's custom made by me to allow light up through to shine on our figures. The goal being, if you see a screen grab of our stuff, even without seeing our logos, you all know who it's from. So this desk is going to be a very integral part of this channel. It first appeared in our last review of the Bountiful Year figure by binding. Moving forward, it's still going to exist in all of our videos, but this light source is going to actually be from a computer. And that computer is integral to being able to even produce Anime Figure Archive moving forward. So this is really just to document something that's going to be a big part of our channel, even if it's kind of like a background character. So why do we even need a computer in the first place? I mean, we've got computers upstairs, right? We edit these videos. Why do I need this computer sitting here in front of me? Well, it has to do with the format that we're going for Anime Figure Archive, which I will finally unveil to you all right now. We've kept it close to our chest because we didn't want to reveal this new format that we're going to introduce that we don't see other people doing for anime figure reviews. So while we're getting all this ready, we didn't want to risk someone taking this idea. And by the way, it's not like revolutionary or anything, it's just new to the anime figure scene, and I think it's something that's going to fit extremely well. Our problem with this channel is that Kohai's Collection reviews just take too long to produce. They're still taking over 20 hours, and the Bountiful Year one like completely kicked our ass and was probably closer to 28 hours to get that fully done. So we're very limited in our capacity to produce a video given that we have full-time jobs, which really limits us to producing maybe one review a month. Now, Kohai's Collection reviews are still going to be our primary focus on this channel, but we want to fill in the gaps with a short form review, and that's going to be Anime Figure Archive. Anime Figure Archive is going to be for any figure that we own. If you all want to see it, just comment below. We'll add it to our list and we'll showcase it for you all. Or it's going to be for new figures that we get that we just don't have time to do a full review on or even want to do a full review on, because again, it's a huge commitment. So we only do things that we're kind of interested in showcasing and that we also think that you all will enjoy seeing. The goal of Anime Figure Archive is to produce a sub 5 minute, so super short form review that's still going to very much have a rating scale and a script behind it. So you're still going to get that quality that you get with a Kohai's Collection review, just kind of condensed, and you're gonna be able to expect kind of the same thing from each episode that we release, but we want to do it in a sub 3 hour interval. And to do that, the way this format is going to look, it's going to be like a Twitch streaming setup. So we're actually going to record from 2 cameras at once with an overlay. So you're going to have kind of a main video feed of the figure and maybe like some web pages that we're pulling for information from them. And then you're going to see ourselves in a wider view, kind of like you see here, but with the figure in front of us over in the corner. We're going to fill in the gaps with information about the figures and even the ratings that we're going to be able to adjust on the fly with something like this Stream Deck right here. We don't see anyone doing this, and we think it's a way for us to continue that quality that we have and like to produce, and still present something to you all that is of that quality and in a format that we can also churn out very quickly. And that's why we need a computer. We need a computer in this room to capture from the 2 cameras and to allow us to do the overlay and live production side of things. We are fortunate enough here to have a studio, but it's still a small room that's really compact and full of stuff. Everything here that you can't see is completely full of video production gear. So we really don't have room to also plop down a computer, monitors, that whole thing. So how can we fit a computer in this space? Well, we have a desk here. What if we did a desk build? And that's also what's taken so long for this project to come together. So the reason it's taken so long is, well, it's essentially me. I'm the reason it's taken so long. I have a really high standard for some of the content I produce when it comes to building computers, because I always have a vision of what I want to see. And in this case, I've always had this vision of this kind of glowing light coming from the desk, and that's what I want to achieve. So we got to build a computer that can emit this amount of light, but because it's part of kind of this channel and some of our promotion of the channel, I also want it to look really cool. And we can achieve that because we have to do water cooling, because I also need this computer to be dead quiet. It has to be quieter than the surrounding noise floor of everything else for the sake of audio quality. So the computer has some very interesting requirements that it needs. It needs to be in a desk, which our options are very limited on. It needs to be water cooled, so it's completely quiet. That's an easier part because I specialize that in my side gig. And 3, I do still need this to be affordable because this whole venture has been expensive, right, with all the production gear that we have, and this is yet another piece of that element. Thankfully, I have a bunch of parts lying around from other sponsorships or what people owe me for things, and I'll get into that when we get to the parts itself. So I can cobble together a PC powerful enough to do what we need it to do, which is just recording 4K content, right? This is not going to be a powerful machine. We're essentially not gaming, right? So on a streaming setup, they're doing gaming plus recording. We're just doing recording. So the computer I've got here, even though it's a few generations behind, should be plenty adequate to produce this content. Now that I've given myself these kind of requirements to build this machine in, the first thing you have to do is get that desk. And you're very limited to what's even available. You've got Lee & Lee, which we see here in front of me right now. But I had another company that was trying to send me a desk a few years ago. I just never had the room for it. It was just too big. And now that we've moved to this new space, I finally have room for it and I have a use case for it. So I contacted them. I've worked with them in the past. They are super cool guys and have been very supportive of me. And they were going to send us a desk. They had no problems with it. They said, hey, just cover shipping and we'll send it to you. So this was a huge deal over buying a brand new Lee & Lee. Saved us a bunch of money, and it was a very unique desk from an Italian manufacturer that pretty much no one has ever seen. So that was really exciting. Unfortunately, the company is going out of business. And even still, they wanted to send us something which was really mind-blowing and humbling. But after about 6 months or so, as they're going through the pressures of closing, we just kind of backed off and kind of let them kind of do their own thing. Truly appreciative of them even offering and wanting to do that. But this set us behind about 6 months or so, because that's how long it took for that to kind of fall off. And I'm back to the drawing board searching for computer desks. So now I'm looking for Lee & Lee. There happened to be a local one on Marketplace for a DK04, which is the smaller variant of what you see here. And from there, I'm limited to Lee & Lee in the hunt for one of these desks. Now, I've never been sponsored by Lee & Lee, and even if I were to contact them about this desk, this stuff has already been released and is towards the end of its life cycle. I think it actually is coming out of production. Maybe they're preparing for a new generation, so there's no need for them to even market it. So I'm on my own for getting this desk. I found a DK04, which is the single PC shorter version of this desk, for $600, which is a steal given that the MSRP is $1,600. Went ahead and picked it up, but unfortunately, it's just really small. It's only about 3 feet wide, which is roughly this width here. And there's just not enough room for Kohai to do a box over here and then bring it over and show it. She just needed more space. So we'd have to add winglets to the side or something, and we still have like computer monitors to deal with to do like all the anime figure archive stuff, so it just didn't quite work out. So next up was hunting a DK05, which eventually I found from a really cool guy locally that was selling it with an entire computer inside of it. And after I sold the parts inside of the desk to a friend, I ended up only paying $500 for the desk, which is a huge steal given that the MSRP is $2,100. So now I've procured the desk, and the rest of it was just to get the rest of the parts from some friends as well as some sponsors to finish out the pieces that you see here. And now that it's all here, I'm going to talk you through what we're looking at, what we're going to build, and we're going to build it. So to start us off, let's talk about the graphics card that I have sitting here in front of me. And to preface, all the water cooling content you're going to see in this has been sponsored by EK Water Blocks, with the exception of the radiators over here, and that's just kind of a different story. But this was sponsored by an industry buddy of mine who sent me over this block, and he sent me over to the RTX 3070 as well. The fun fact here is that he owed me for some graphic design work I did on a build that was Genshin Impact theme, and I've got the back plate right here. Now, I didn't work on this specific piece, but I did the graphics for the actual case itself. His original person fell through, and so he needed like some last minute like rushed work. And so out of that deal, instead of a direct financial compensation, I got this RTX 3070, and I actually got a 42-inch ROG monitor that I've got in our game room. This should be complete overkill for this computer. I mean, it's only recording video, and it's going to have like dual 4K monitors attached. But encoding wise, this should be a powerhouse for what we need it for. Hopefully I'm right. I have not recorded with OBS before, but I think this is going to suit the build just fine. So let's go ahead and move on to the heart of the computer, which is going to be the motherboard. Now, originally this was going to be a Gigabyte sponsored build. This is actually from something that fell through that a friend of mine did, and he said that, hey, if you want this, you can have it. And in the event that you do build with it, you can just send the photos to Gigabyte and they can share it. So I was going to use this Z590 Vision, which is why I'm actually on a much older Intel platform, because this is what I started with, and the friend gave me an Intel i7 10700K, which is going to be the processor for this build. It's an 8-core, should be plenty, again, for doing OBS recording. But while waiting for all this to come through, Newegg had a sale on something too cool that I couldn't say no to, and being a huge fanboy of this brand, I had to purchase, and added to the fact that it's going to match this build extremely well, which is this beauty right here, which is a Maximus 8 Extreme Glacial, which is their Z590 offering, and this was the first time that Asus ROG did the Glacial. So this is a fully water-cooled motherboard. This includes cooling the South Bridge side of things, as well as the CPU with a monoblock, which you can see on the back, that was developed hand in hand by EK Water Blocks. This was a Halo tier product when it came out for $1,500 that Newegg was selling for $200 brand new. And so I jumped on that immediately because this silver and white's going to look really good, and you can see it's going to match the GPU that we have here. And I've always wanted to build with a Glacial. I'll take that back, I have built with a Glacial before. This is the first Glacial I'm keeping together in one piece. I dismantled the other Glacial for another project, but that's beside the point. Anyways, super excited to finally own a Glacial for myself, and this should be a fun way to add some flair to this project here. I can't really show you the motherboard outside of this box because it's in pieces, so it literally just has the bare PCB and then the block on a separate side, but I'll show you the assembly process when we get to it. So with the motherboard aside, and knowing that I'm using an Intel 10700K, that can lead us into our memory and storage configuration. This is complete overkill, but as some of y'all know, our editing rig died. Well, my last editing rig had 128 gigs of DDR4 in it, which, funny enough, the 10th gen Intels do support, so my little 10700K is going to be rocking 128 gigs of RAM just because I have it lying around. It's already got the nickel blocks that you can see here. This was from a prior EK sponsorship for my initial video editing rig. And then I even have a block on top, so even the RAM is going to be water-cooled, which is absurd, unnecessary, but it's going to match the Glacial extremely well, and I'm glad that I can take advantage of this set of RAM again. Now, the 10700K is actually limiting me. The major difference between the 11th gen and 10th gen processors is that the 11th gen supports PCI 4.0 and 10th gen does not. So if I had an 11th gen processor, I could run PCI 4.0 SSDs on this same motherboard because the Z590 chipset supports it. So for the storage drive, I've just got an old PCI 3.0. This is a 512 gig 950 Pro from Samsung. But the more interesting one that we will have is going to be dual 2 terabyte NVMe SSDs from Sabrent. These are going to make a 4 terabyte storage pool that will be recording all of that video to. So it should be plenty fast for video recording, as well as enough storage to produce this 5-minute video that maybe has 30 minutes worth of actual recordings, and then we can even store a few on the computer until I can offload them to my server. So next we have a super overkill power supply for this setup. We're using an EVGA 1300 G2. This actually came with the desk that I bought from that gentleman. And this is one of the things that I did not sell off because it's such a good power supply and I wanted to use it. It's based off Superflower's LeadX platform, so it's really stable. I ended up contacting CableMod so we can get some custom cables. They've been a huge supporter of mine, super cool guys, and they always really enhance the builds that you're doing. So highly recommended. These are designed in their Pro configurator that they have online where you can choose all the individual colors of the cables as well as like anodizing colors for the combs as well as how many that you need. So really excited to see these. It always really elevates the build, and I could even go as far as to do custom lengths. So some of these are shorter, so they should fit in the locations they need to really well. And it's going to match everything extremely well because this is our color scheme. We've got, white, black, and silvers here on the radiators. Our fans are white. We're going to have white on the glacial, but the glacial has a ton of silvers in it. Our water blocks have nickel, silver, and black. So this should look really stunning when it's all said and done. And then to wrap it all up, we just have some EK components here. As stated earlier, this whole build, with the exception of the radiators, are going to be sponsored by EK water blocks. There are 10 fans, I think, that they sent over. I've actually got dual pumps. I just have one sitting here. And I've got a really cool layout that I think is going to be very unique and add to like the look and aesthetic of this build, plus be unique. The dual pumps are going to be in parallel, as well as the dual radiators are going to be in parallel. There is no need to actually have dual D5s other than loudness, like for volume reasons. So I can run 2 pumps at a lower setting to move a similar amount of water than I can 1 pump. And that's the whole reason I'm shifting to 2 pumps, is just to keep this whole build quiet. The dual 480 rads I did have to buy because when EK initially sponsored this, they sent over 360mm radiators for that prior desk that fell through. So I'm just going to use those for a different project. And so I bought these out of pocket because the Lee uses dual 480mm radiators, and I wanted to make sure we filled that up. So this build should be able to stay extremely cool given that we're only cooling a 10700K, RTX 3070, and RAM and a motherboard. And we've got dual 480mm radiators to do that job with, of course, 8 fans across those. So we should be able to keep the fans running at their near lowest speed. And I'll probably have them at a fixed speed the entire time. So the computer will never even be able to ramp up. And even with the computer ramping up, we should have enough radiator space to keep all that nice and quiet. That way I never hear the computer when we're recording our videos. So a special shout out to EK Waterblocks. They've always been a big supporter of mine. And I greatly appreciate everything they send over because honestly, I'm pretty priced out of the water cooling scene now. And if I didn't have them as a supporter, I couldn't do like any of the water cooled builds that I do. So super cool company. They're basically the ASUS of water cooling. They offer different products at different tiers, which other water cooling brands don't do. They tend to only have their one product line. EK, you can go from very expensive Halo level products all the way down to affordable lineups to get you into water cooling. Now I've done a little bit of work for this build off camera, and actually you see them right here. This piece and this piece are actually going to be light panels. So when you see me time lapse into the build, you're going to see me inserting these in the blank vacant areas. For those not aware, this desk is actually capable of holding 2 computers, not just 1. We only need 1 computer. So half of it's going to be the computer, the other half is going to be light panels. That way we can radiate all that light through here and hopefully have a nice even tone, even though we're getting light from a computer. So that's the goal with these. I've already crafted these. We just have to get them into the computer, then run all the LED lighting through them. And the last piece of hardware going into this is going to be this 4K capture card, which can record from 4 HDMI sources up to 4K resolutions. From there, we have a Stream Deck XL to key up things like our graphics, mainly from the rating system that we're going to have. And so we'll be able to, on the fly, be able to be like, oh, this is going to get a 4 out of 5, click the 4 out of 5, and it's going to appear on screen for you all. It'll also allow us to switch camera feeds, allow us to, instead of maybe showing you the figure, switch to like a live capture of the computer where maybe I'm showing you a Ami listing or my figure collection listing of that figure. So we can even give you all more detail on the fly at a push of a button. I ended up getting these after doing some odd job for my boss in Japan. So a lot of this, thankfully, even though I had to spend money, wasn't necessarily directly out of my pocket. I was able just to convert some simple labor to acquiring a lot of what you see here. With that being said, I still feel really humbled that I even have all this sitting here in front of me. You know, my relationships with these brands and the people that I know are the only thing that make this possible, right? And so I'm really fortunate to have them. With that, let's finally build the computer that I've been waiting over a year for. Look at past innocent senpai thinking that this was going to be a easy, straightforward build. Little does he know he's about to make a mistake that's going to add to a plethora of things that made this build a total nightmare. And it all starts right here with how he assembles the motherboard, specifically where he places the M.2 drive. You see, you want to install the M.2 drive where it's attached to the CPU lanes versus the chipset lanes. Traditionally, you install it in slot 1, which is the closest one to the CPU socket. This is due to the physical length of the traces, and then being shorter increases the signal integrity, so you have a better connection and bandwidth between those two and less latency. And on every motherboard he's encountered so far, the number 1 slot that's connected to the PCI lanes is that top slot. So this is where the Glacial gets funky. You see, he spent too much time looking at what PCI lanes he could use when installing drives in certain places that he didn't read the labels. Turns out on a Glacial board, it's labeled a little differently. You see, traditionally top slot is 1, followed by 2, 3 in descending order. On the Glacial, the top slot is number 3, the second one is number 1, and the third slot is number 2. So the slot directly under the monoblock is not actually the CPU connected M.2 slot. Due to my PCI lane configuration, slot 3 was disabled and I could only see what was installed in the M.2 slots, which I needed for my storage array. And as you'll see in this video, as I get to the very end thinking I'm about to be done, I have to start over, fix that, and reassemble. Okay, so it's now 8 hours later and I'm definitely done for the day, but I wanted to go ahead and show you these components that I've been working on before we put them in the desk. And here in front of me is the motherboard that I wasn't able to show you due to the fact that I had to assemble it. But here we have it in all of its glory. This is the Z590 Glacial from ASUS. This was $200 well spent, that's for sure. With everything you see installed on it, this motherboard weighs over 10 pounds, which is insane for a motherboard. Maybe a high-end board might weigh 3 pounds, 4 pounds, something like that, with some of the cheaper boards weighing not even a pound. So 10 pounds for a motherboard is bonkers. I was worried certain things weren't going to fit because you can see my memory in the memory block. I was afraid it was going to collide with the monoblock of the motherboard. and these ports are crazy close together, but I was able to create a pathway to link the mono block to the RAM block. And with the use of offset fittings, we've now got a pathway this way to return to the GPU, and this is going to go to the pumps. And this next part of the video is very ironic. When water cooling, it's super important that you test everything along the way, because once you fill it with water, it's a pain in the butt to then undo it to service something. And with a motherboard like this is, the worst motherboard to service ever. Yes, it is. Just to swap the M.2 in the top slot here, I'd have to remove the entire block to do so. And, same for the CPU. All of that has to go, which would take forever. Yes, it did. Thankfully, I was able to boot it to BIOS. It sees the processor, it sees all 128 gigs of RAM, so we're good to go there. Lol, nope. And I even air tested all the water elements so we know that it's leak-free and we're good to go. And no, we are not. In past Senpai's defense, normally we only get to the post screen for the BIOS where we can see RAM, we can see the CPU that's there, and then we cut it off. When I traditionally build a water-cooled computer, I go as far as leaving everything on air, and then actually installing Windows and all drivers. That way I can test everything prior to disassembly and putting the water blocks on it. But in the case of the Glacial, because it has a mono block, I can't put an air cooler on it because there are certain elements of the board that have to be cooled. So I only turn it on long enough to get to the post screen, then had to kill it. Moving forward, if I have a motherboard with a mono block, I probably should go as far as putting a simple basic custom loop on it, just so I can go ahead and test everything, get Windows installed so I don't have these issues in the future. But you live and learn. Even as an experienced builder, it's best to always reference the instructions. Next up here, we have these monster 480mm radiators that I was working on, and there are in fact 2 of them. I've got Vardar fans installed here, and they're annoying because the mounts are directional. Meaning that if I want to switch the direction of the fans, I have to then swap the orientations of each of the mounts. So I had to take all 8 fans, because these are mounted backwards to their normal orientation, and swap all of them. So that took forever. Then I had to, of course, come up and wire this all neatly, so once it's installed, you're not going to see any of the wires other than what's up here, because this is going to be at the bottom to where the desk is. These 2 radiators are going to be linked in parallel to each other, which is something you don't see often, but I think it's going to make for a very neat look. And the last primary component going into the computer are going to be the dual pumps. So just like the radiators being in parallel, so too are these pumps and reservoirs. I've got them linked right here. So this is going to be our output and this is our input. But I think this looks fantastic. It's now symmetrical with the radiators, of course, they're going to be in parallel. Once I have this in the desk, you're going to see how this helps orientation-wise, because this is going to go to the motherboard, and whenever you have the radiator sitting up here, they're also going to go that same direction, and they're going to go around the light panel that sits in front of them. So it's not going to block any of the light, and it's going to have a nice clean look as it goes over to the GPU and motherboard. Really excited with how this is turning out. The colors are fantastic. They match our cables, they match the Glacial, so this is going to be a stunning computer when it's all said and done. Next up, we have to take all these components that I've prepared and put them into the desk. I'm going to go to sleep right now, but you all get the joy of going right into the time lapse of the install. One of my biggest nightmares and time sinks in this entire build had to do with these RGB panels you see here. I'm not a stranger to ARGB LEDs, but this is my first time doing custom ARGB strips. And this led to a multitude of things that I didn't realize and lots of undoing and redoing, and I spent well over 12 hours just working on these LED panels that the video doesn't really showcase. I quickly learned that ARGB strips are directional, so whenever I linked them together, that originally linked one the wrong direction, so that's why the second strip was not getting any power. Then once I corrected that, I connected it to the controller, and not all LEDs were lighting up. This led me to testing with multiple different controllers where I was getting some more LEDs than others, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out what was going on. After lots of research, I learned more about ARGB. Now, I knew LEDs were addressable, right? But I didn't realize the controller would only address up to a certain amount of them. It turns out the controller that's built into this desk can only address around 60 LEDs, which is a problem given that the light panel up top has almost double that, and the panel at the bottom has almost 4 times as many LEDs. So at this point I was getting quite frustrated because I didn't know how I was going to address all of these because I can't change the controller settings. Eventually I realized that if I split the signal, each split signal can still address 60 RGB LEDs since they're just a clone of each other. And as long as the controller could provide power, I could power all the LEDs. And since I can solder, I can also add supplemental 5-volt power from the power supply. So I started out by trying to buy a physical controller that was designed to do the splitting task. And for the life of me, even though I was following the line diagram appropriately, I could not get it to split the signal and work. I finally ended up just soldering and creating a splitter myself, which worked just fine, albeit it's quite ugly. But I did test it by leaving them on white for over 24 hours, and the cables were not hot at all, so I know that there's no resistance issues going through. I'm not drawing too much power for the gauge of wire that I was using. But just to get to that point, like I said, I'd spent about 12 hours just in the lights alone. So this project, every step of the way, was fighting me. But as with all things, I've now gone through the struggle, and I can add this to my repertoire of something I'm capable of doing. And it's at this point I actually boot this off camera, only to find out that I could not see the boot drive. It took me well over an hour of tinkering with BIOS settings, trying to figure out why M.21 was turned off even though everything said it was and it wasn't seeing the drive. It wasn't until I finally looked at the manual closely and saw that they were out of order. Again, the top slot was actually slot 3, second one slot 1, third slot 2. Now I have to drain it, remove the board, disassemble it, and move the M.2. Now I did this off camera since you all have already seen that process earlier on in the video, so now let's get it back into the computer. And finally, it's now booting, it's good to go, so let's go ahead and show off the final build. And with all that mess out of the way, I have finally finished this project. And ultimately, I'm very pleased with how it turned out. It's just annoying that, of course, I made this difficult for myself, right? Like, this didn't have to be as elaborate or show-offy as it is, but I just can't help myself because it deals with computers and something else that I'm also passionate about. So when this came about, it had to be something that I'm proud of because you're going to see it, albeit in a slightly different manner, in every video moving forward. And in fact, if you follow our channel, you have already seen this in its completed form. The first time you saw it was in the Furyu expose video, where it came in handy that I had my monitors here to the left and right that I could read the script from. And then you saw it again in the Furyu Hatsune Miku review. It just didn't make any sense to break up the momentum we had off the Furyu expose, so it made more sense to go into a Furyu PVC figure review. And now I can introduce the computer that you see here, which hopefully will lead to, very soon, our first episode of Anime Figure Archive. And now that I've lived with it for a while, let me show you some of the things that I like and dislike about the final product, and we'll start with what you see here. Most importantly, because it's seen in every video, it's going to do the job of branding us, right? This looks different than anything else I've seen other content creators in this space do. Our table is literally glowing and uplighting our presentation. And I have this custom turntable I made here, which also allows some of that light to filter up through. My biggest disappointment with the end product is that the lighting is not as even as I want it to be. We still have a dark spot over here where all the components sit, and there's not much I can do about that without really compromising how that side looks. But overall and on camera, I don't think you notice it too much. Like if you actively look, you will see that darker spot over here, but it doesn't really affect how it presents on the figure. I am proud that I have an adjustable switch over here so I can increase or decrease the brightness of this. That does help dial that in, and that's a very convenient feature. So I don't even have to have this computer on, and I can still technically light it and change how that looks on camera. That's a very slick feature that I didn't think about implementing at the time when I started the project, but I'm glad I've done for the final version of this project. I also appreciate that this is a versatile solution here and will help me out when I do Senpai Showroom, when I do the photography and the B-roll of these figures. This right here is also an RGB panel, so if I turn down the lights here, I can quickly switch this to different colors. So if I wanted to film this Kurumi with a red accent color, I can do so. Also, once again, helping out with branding because we have a lit source underneath the figure. Another thing I appreciate is that this is also a sit-stand desk, which for Senpai Showroom means that I can adjust the height of the desk to get a better angle versus adjusting the camera setup, which takes a lot more time. So now let's remove this glass top and let me walk you through the internals. Okay, so we're looking at the computer case from the angle that I see whenever I'm sitting at the desk. And overall, I am very pleased with how this turned out. Aesthetically, what I like the most about this is the unique run that I have from the pump reservoir combos to the radiators. In cases like this, usually someone has to fill this area with miscellaneous stuff. This case can hold 2 computers, so you could have one right here. But if you don't have anything there, you're probably going to fill this with like reservoirs and like complicated tube runs just to fill this out. In this case, of course, I have a light panel here, and there's one right here that you can't see on camera because it's as wide as I can get my framing. But I filled it, of course, with a light panel to help shine up to the top. So this here, one gets the tube run out of the way of the panel, and that's just a beautiful shape that I just don't often see when it comes to computers. And that's thanks to this being a unique paralleled setup here that also gets into a relatively unique radiator setup being in parallel. Usually these would be in serial. Over here we have a pretty standard water-cooled build, right? You got a fully blocked motherboard and you have the GPU. But we have beautiful cable mod cables to tidy that up, but I had to make a cover over here to hide some of the mess because this case has really poor cable management. But I was able to put my logo for my PC company over here, and vice versa, to hide cables on this side, I was able to put Kohai's collection logo, so I do appreciate having both those aesthetics in this case. The biggest reason to use water cooling in this is for noise levels, right? You do not want to hear the computer in a recording environment. It needs to be inaudible. And that's what I'm able to achieve with this computer here. In fact, I cannot hear it whatsoever. It is quieter than the noise floor of my environment, which is perfect. So I can have a high performance computer here, and I never have to worry about it ramping up so loud that it's going to be caught on our microphones. The advantage to having dual pumps like you see over here is because I can run them at a much lower RPM and still achieve a good flow rate. That's the same reason for using dual 480mm radiators and having 8 fans across them, because I can run them at a really low RPM but still dissipate a ton of heat. So I'm very impressed with how quiet this computer is, and I'm able to maintain, the high level performance you see over here, even though it's only producing about 400 watts or so, and I can maintain that at a very cool level very quietly. The computer is only idling right now, but it's only 1 to 2 C higher than ambient temperature. So even under full load, when this produces around maybe 400 watts or so, I should easily be able to control that. Looking at the LEDs, you can actually see the banks of 2 LEDs that I have. So we have these strips here, and then we have the banks. Now I do wish this could be more diffused, but the only way to diffuse that more is to raise the top of this panel up higher. And that's just not going to happen because of the clearances that I have to do to get under the reservoir. But by the time the light from this hits where the top of the glass is, it's very diffuse. So it does do a good job of that. But aesthetically, when looking at it, it's kind of annoying. I have to see these stripes. But the reason you see 2 in each bank is because half of those are the ones I can control on the dimmer. So you can see here, I can literally turn that whole section off, and what's remaining there is powered solely by the computer itself. So I can change those using the RGB software on there to whatever I need it to be. Or I can use the control panel on the case itself, and then I can control it from there. This is also why I can add light to this setup without having the computer on. So for some reason I didn't need the computer because maybe I was just doing a photo shoot or something, and I just wanted white light, I could just then crank up that dial. So it's a very convenient feature to have for our productions. But yeah, overall, very thrilled with how all this came together. And because it's RGB, yes, you can have all the rainbows that you want. So there it is. It feels great to finally have this done, being such a crucial element to what we need moving forward. I can't thank our sponsors, Cable Mod and EK Water Blocks, enough. All in all, I'm in this project for less than $2,000, with $1,200 of that being the cost of the monitors and the desk alone. So getting all of this for $2,000 is insane, and I could not do it without them. I know this content is different than what we normally do, but I hope you enjoyed the inside look at this very crucial part of our channel moving forward. If you like in-depth anime figure reviews, please check out our channel and consider subscribing. I'm Senpai. Take care.